Hey, Black Girls with Fibroids, it's Portia here. I am 6 days post-op from my myomectomy. Healing is going, in my opinion, really well. I'm walking, I'm taking all the fiber and probiotics I shared with y'all before. I did lift something and strain myself a little bit, and that was my fault, completely my fault. I did not estimate how heavy the thing was. So when they say don't lift, just don't lift nothing. Unless you lifting don't lift anything. You couple your water container, lift the water, but don't do it, because I messed myself up. And it still hurts in my lower right abdomen. And so that's one thing. But someone messaged me about talking about mental health, and it was such a good question, and I felt kind of embarrassed that I hadn't done a better job of talking about how I've been handling like pre-surgery, during, and then post mentally. And so I want to share that. Prior to going into surgery, I did make a YouTube video on me being stressed out about just what surgery would do to my body and scarring, specifically like having to look in the mirror and see these scars. I think it's, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I mean that seriously. Like, I've never had a kid. When I hear my friends that have had C-sections or had a surgery that required a C-section, it was for birthing purposes, right? So to know that I am going through something similarly to remove something that does not result in like a life or in some kind of addition in that way, that was something I struggled with quite a bit. Like my friend's like, oh, I had a C-section and I had my kid. I'm like, yeah, I'm having a C-section and I get nothing from it. If that makes sense. I hope it makes sense. And I probably sound like a jerk. And if I do, call me out on it. I'm okay with that. But before going into surgery, my biggest concern was like the scarring of my body, because my body had changed so much. And a lot of folks have talked about this already. Our bodies change so much with fibroids, right? It's already difficult enough saying my body is growing in these ways, or expanding, I should say, not growing, expanding in these ways that I have no control over, even though I'm trying to control it with working out and plant-based diets. Like, I can't stop the growth of these tumors, like these fibroids, these benign tumors. And so that was difficult enough. And even though I know surgery would remove them, I was like, how will this impact my body again, right? What will my body look like? My mother has always said, oh, you have such a pretty, smooth stomach. And so knowing that, like, nope, now it's going to look like whatever it looks like with these scars on it, was difficult for me. And I've been telling lots of people, a couple of my friends, I was like, I'm going to have to get stomach tattoos. It's going to say Thug Life, One Wife, a Mistress, and a Girlfriend. And I've said that before. It's a line from a rapper. If you know the rapper, let me know below. But I was really worried about what the scarring would do, because I think it's one thing if you're saying, oh, I'm going through this situation, I'm going through this C-section, cesarean, surgery because I'm having a kid, versus I'm going to remove something that was never invited to be a part of my body. Does that make sense? So that was really difficult, like really, really hard for me to deal with. Going the day, stress. I was stressed because I didn't know the time of my surgery, and I recognized different hospitals do different things. And I got a couple of remarks, some people saying, yeah, that was the same for me. I didn't know until the day before. Other people said, oh, I knew like way in advance. And I could see how both could be both helpful and like triggering, right? For me, it was triggering. As someone who plans, I love a plan. I love a checklist. Not knowing how to plan my time before was really difficult for me. I called that number at least 4 or 5 times. And I mean, they were like, oh, they'll call you the day before. So that morning, I called. I was like, hey, surgery's tomorrow. I have not received the call. They're like, oh, check back later. Called again. Hey, surgery's tomorrow. Oh, they won't have that until this time. Okay, call at that time. Hey. When they was like, oh, she'll call you. I'll make sure you're at the top of the list. I had to get an MRI. And I told her I have to get an MRI. She's like, well, we'll make sure we try to get you at the beginning. No, they did not. They did not get me at the beginning. And my MRI was pushed back like 30 minutes. They were late. After my MRI, it was like 15 minutes after I had completed my MRI, which took 30 minutes that they called. And as someone who plans, I don't like things being late, right? I don't like people being late. I try not to be late to things. If you're telling me, oh, it's hard to this time, and I know you're chronically late, is one thing. But if you tell me, hey, Porsche X, Y, and Z starts at this, early is on time is late, and late is abysmal. That's how I run my life. Like, early is on time is late, late is abysmal. I'm not here for no other times. I don't care. I don't care. I hear y'all, but what about nope, 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 nope. Because I am scheduling things around, this time frame. And so that was really difficult. And that made me mentally, I was dealing with anxiety. I was so anxious because I kept thinking, no one's called yet. No one's called yet. What time? Because they tell you things like no eating after midnight. You can only drink up to this many hours before. And I'm like, how am I supposed to plan for all that if y'all have not told me what time, right? What if I was scheduled to go in at 2 a.m. for surgery? Hypothetically, I'm not sure how surgeon schedules work. I'm just saying because my surgeon did have a surgery before me, and I was scheduled to arrive at 10, and I ended up waiting for. I got there at 9:30 because I'm early. And I didn't go back until I went back at like 10:20, 10:30. But I didn't go in for surgery until like 2:30 in the afternoon because my surgeon was still in surgery. So I mentioned I got there early. Honestly, the day of, I felt so good. And I have got to attribute it to people like family and friends, like just praying for me, like praying for peace in the space, praying for just like calmness or sending like thoughts around calmness and that kind and that. And I think I cannot ignore that piece of it. For me, I think I am a body with a soul and spirit, right? And so that's how I operate in life. And so so knowing people were praying for that, I think definitely made a big difference for me because I went in with such like a good attitude. And that doesn't mean I wasn't thinking about things. Like, very real for me before this surgery, beginning of the year, I had met with an attorney and had my medical power of attorney and all that stuff drawn up. I have everything done, legally signed. The people that need to have it, have it. I did that in January. And I'll say this, and I knew I was going to get surgery this year, and I wasn't sure when. But for me, as someone who has fibroids, I think I am doing people in my family a disservice. For anyone, if you have health reasons, I think you're doing yourself and your family a disservice if you have not done the work for that. And maybe that's a conversation for another time. And it may be because I'm really comfortable with talking about that, like talking about death. Like, I'm the oldest of 3 kids with my mom. And as a single parent, those are questions I started asking at 17. Like, at 17, I remember sitting down, like, mentally and making a plan. If anything happens to my mom, like, what will I need to do, like, to take care of my siblings? At 17 and 18, we were sitting around. I was like, where's the will? Who has X, Y, and Z? Where are the insurance policies? Because that's not talking about it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, right? And so again, especially as someone who's older or anybody, if people are looking to me to provide anything, whether it be if you're a parent or you're like the primary provider for the home, whatever it is, I think you do a disservice. And I'm gonna say it. I think it's really unkind and unloving to not be prepared. I said it. I don't care. I've been to too many funerals where folks are trying to put money together for headstones. I think it's unkind and unloving to not take the time to say, hey, this is a very real thing. Because the question is not if you will pass on. The question is, when will you pass on? And so for me, knowing that I was going into surgery, I re-upped. I sent those people those documents again the day of the surgery. You can ask one of my best friends. You could ask Nick the day of. I was like, hey, I've talked to, my mom and to Matthew. This is what happens. This is who gets how much money. This is what you get. This is what my siblings, and I am on the phone. We are in the line in the valet preparing to go into the building. And this is the conversation I'm having. And did I believe I'd be okay? Definitely so. But again, it is not lost on me that someone else went into the hospital today to have a surgery. They did not come out. And I know that's so heavy to talk about. But again, not talking about it does not seem like the kind or considerate thing to do. And so I have been known to lean into hard places. It's a hard conversation, but one that needs to be had nonetheless, right? How many people do you know that went somewhere, unexpected passings? I'm not even gonna talk about the ones I'm gonna cry. My cousin was one of my favorite cousins. It was unexpected. And I just can't, I couldn't do that to people, right? I have no children, but I do have friends and family. And I've taken precautions, right? I've gotten insurance policies on purpose. Like, that's why you get it. So if something happens, no one's scrambling to figure things out. Um, Again, that's a long tangent, but thinking about mentally where I was at, that's something I thought about was if I don't come out of this, like, okay, like, am I okay? And I was okay. I have made my peace with a whole lot of things. And that sounds so maybe odd to say it out loud, but it's surgery and you don't know, right? You don't know. I've heard about fatalities and not to be scary, but to be quite realistic that these things happen. So, that was one part. When I was in pre-op for surgery, I was in really good spirits. Like, I really, like, our nurse was good. Me and mom back there cracking jokes and laughing while I was in the gown in the bed. And that helped, because even though I was aware of the time, I brought a book. And I had my phone, but I brought a book. And so that helped pass time for me. And I was like, not stressed. I just was not stress free.